Okay, Mark. Mark Polson, you're the founder of Langcat.
I
Um,
am.
I've heard about you from some of my colleagues, and then I looked at some of your products, which explain fund costs, but also platform costs very clearly. So perhaps you could tell me a little bit about your company and why you set it up and why you do what you do.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, hello, and thank you for having me. I run this funny little company called the Langcat. We're based in Leith in Edinburgh, and any of your viewers who've watched Train Spotting will know all about Leith already. But it's much nicer than that sometimes. And we spend most of our lives profiling the ways in which people invest. So we look at the kind of providers who allow you to hold investments. We call those investment platforms most of the time. And we look at funds and stuff as well that people might put their money into. I set this business up 7 years ago. I used to work for lots of the big financial services providers that people would know. And I kind of didn't like that very much, and they didn't like me very much. And that became pretty apparent. So we had a divorce, and I got the CDs, and I see the dog every second week. And I kind of decided that what I'd seen on the way through in the kind of big corporate life was a bunch of stuff that I didn't like very much. And what's happened over the years is that there wasn't like one smoke-filled room where this happened, right? It's the accumulation of many thousands of decisions over a long time. But basically, the decks are so heavily loaded against investors in terms of information and what it's reasonable to ask people to find out. That there's space in there for someone to try and bust through a little bit of that. But to do that, you've really got to know your stuff. Having come from that background, the bet was, well, I hope I do kind of know my stuff. And if we try and bust through some of that in a way that doesn't make people want to kill themselves as they read it, we might get somewhere. That's the genesis of the business.
So this is the other thing I was going to ask you. I've got into trouble with some of my clients for using humor in my content, but your content is always interspersed with humor. So do you think that actually helps people digest financial information, or is it a risk from your point of view?
Oh, it's probably a risk as well. Somebody wrote to me after one of the things we put out that said, there's useful information here, but this infantile kind of language. And I think it was Colonel Fotherington's my, and okay, right, it's not for everybody, but a couple of things about it. First of all, I get bored quickly. And so when I'm writing things and when my guys are writing things, we kind of entertain ourselves a little bit by doing this. Second of all, the serious part of what's going on inside all this is that the decisions you make when you're investing are huge, right? People have said, we should make it more like buying a mobile phone or whatever else. Yeah, well, if you buy the wrong mobile phone, you get a crap camera, or you're disappointed for a year till you can change your contract. Get your pension wrong or your investments wrong, you've just screwed your retirement, or you've screwed your chance to buy a house, or whatever it might be, right? Mm. So these decisions are large. And so we ask people, in my industry, we ask people to engage with very complex, quite sophisticated concepts. But if you hammer them with that all the time and make them feel like, oh, Christ, this is horrific. How on earth am I going to do that? If you do that all the time, people will just switch off. Yeah. And it's not just young people, it's anyone will switch off, right? Nobody needs to be badgered. But that's what the financial industry does. So our bet is, if we kind of leaven the kind of heavy stuff with some lighter stuff and some kind of funny cats and things that make us laugh, then that's okay. And whenever you read one of our publications, if there's a bit of something that's very serious or numbers heavy or data heavy that you've got to digest, you'll find that we bookend it with something to try and cheer you up. And what we believe, and people tell us we're right, so I hope they're not just being nice, is that kind of helps. So it just gives the information a moment to sink in before we go on to the next thing. That's why we do it.
Now, you and I both know that being impartial is really important. So,
am I completely bent? Is what you're asking?
Yeah.
most of the work that we do is much drier than the stuff that we publish out into the world. And we sell that to providers. So we work with lots of fund managers, lots of investment platforms, lots of these guys. And what we're doing most of the time is trying to help them develop their services in a way that's going to be relevant for the people that are going to use them. But the ethos of trying to keep things simple, keep it relevant, provide stuff that is genuinely useful to people and point out where folk get ripped off, that goes for all the work that we do. When we publish something out into the world that's free to download from the site or whatever, most of the time that's got no commercial influence whatsoever. So the guide on direct platforms, for example, which I think you've got a copy of there, nobody pays us a cent to do that. And basically it's a byproduct of a bunch of work that we've done. It so happens we've got all this data, we've got all this information, and one of the things we like doing is putting that out there. So that side of things is totally unslanted, but of course we're a commercial organization and we do get paid to do research as well. Wherever that happens, we always put a disclaimer on the front that says XYZ paid us to do this. And if you want to not believe it as a result of that, that's fine. But we're mainly with this stuff, we're dealing with numbers. And if you treat the numbers in the right way, they'll just tell you the things that are true, you know. We're not a drug company, you know, we don't gather, for example, we don't gather data on individual investors who download the stuff. You just download it and that's you, you know, we don't ask you for how much you've got in various different things or whatever. We are not Cambridge Analytica. I kind of wish we were, right? We'd have a lot more money. And I would have influenced some elections, which would have been awesome. We just do funny cats and investments.